It's hard to believe that it's been nearly a decade since The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild launched alongside the Nintendo Switch. Sorry for making you feel old. Breath of the Wild is a staggeringly massive game filled with secrets, weapons, and the now iconic Korok seeds hidden in every corner of the lush fields of Hyrule. When it launched in 2017, you could play Breath of the Wild for hundreds of hours without running out of things to do, but that didn't satisfy Nintendo apparently, since there's been a plethora of content added to the game in the years following its release. If you are planning on returning to the land of Hyrule now that the game is getting re-released on the Nintendo Switch 2, here's a guide on everything new added to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild since its initial release. There was one major piece of DLC available post-launch for Breath of the Wild, but in typical Nintendo fashion, it was a little more complicated than it needed to be. The Breath of the Wild expansion pass included 3 separate DLC packs released over the course of 2017. The first pack, titled the Expansion Pack Bonus, gave players 3 relatively underwhelming treasure chests containing some supplies and an exclusive Nintendo Switch branded t-shirt for Link to wear. With an armor rating of 1, however, it's not something that should be worn out into battle. The Master Trials DLC was a much more substantial release. It included a handful of new modes that let players test their skills with things like Challenge Trials and Master Mode. Additionally, the DLC added movable warp points, a ton of new side quests, and Hero's Path, a map option that lets players track where they've been. The Master Trials DLC pack also added a ton of new equipment from some of the Zelda series' most iconic characters like Midna's helmet, Tingle's leotard, the Phantom armor, and Majora's Mask. The third piece of DLC, confusingly called the Champion's Ballad DLC Pack 2, is the biggest addition to Breath of the Wild. It adds a new main questline that has players return to the Great Plateau, 16 new challenging shrines, remixed boss fights, even more new outfits and armor, but most importantly, it adds a sick-ass motorcycle for Link to drive. The Champion's Ballad is the best piece of content for anyone looking for more out of Breath of the Wild's story, since it continues to bridge the gaps between the events of the game and the events from the past, but as is the case with the rest of Breath of the Wild's storytelling, it's pretty bare bones. In anticipation of the launch of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in late 2017, Nintendo added a Xenoblade crossover armor set to Breath of the Wild. To get the set, players have to solve a riddle and follow some shooting stars, and once they've completed the side quest, they'll have collected 3 pieces of salvager armor that looks a lot like Rex's outfit from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Unfortunately, like most of the DLC armor, the salvager set isn't able to be upgraded, so it's not great for late game areas. Looks pretty cool though. On top of the major content additions, Breath of the Wild has seen plenty of free, small patches and updates. Nintendo tends to be more than a little vague when it comes to explaining what specifically its patches address, so it can be tricky to know what exactly has been changed in the 10 updates that we've seen since Breath of the Wild launched. Nintendo assures us that with each patch, adjustments have been made to make for a more pleasant gaming experience, but that doesn't give us much to go off of. Instead, fans of Breath of the Wild have banded together to discuss the minor changes they've experienced with each update, including things like bug fixes that break infinite item farming and slight frame rate improvements, but there hasn't been anything major added or changed from the base game in its subsequent updates. Like many Nintendo Switch games, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has Amiibo support where players can get additional in-game items once per day by connecting their Amiibo to the game. Non-Zelda related Amiibo will give you random items, but Zelda Amiibo can give you some of the DLC items found in the Master Trials and Champion's Ballad DLC packs. Additionally, after Breath of the Wild came out, Nintendo released 4 new Amiibo for the 4 champion characters in-game: Daruk, Mipha, Revali, and Urbosa. By scanning the Amiibo, players will get helmet armor pieces related to the relevant divine beasts for each champion, and Link will gain a buff related to each character's abilities. With the launch of the Switch 2, Nintendo is releasing a native Switch 2 version of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the new console. Luckily, anyone who already owns Breath of the Wild and is subscribed to the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack will get the Switch 2 version for free. However, the upgrade costs $10 for everyone else. Anyone wanting to pick up a new copy of Breath of the Wild for the Switch 2 will find it available for $70. Before we get into what's new with the Switch 2 version, it's important to note that the game doesn't include the Breath of the Wild Expansion Pass DLC, so if you want to experience the Master Trials or ride around on that motorcycle, you'll unfortunately still need to pay for it. Thanks to the improved hardware of the Switch 2, the new version of Breath of the Wild will have improved graphics. Breath of the Wild will run at 60 frames per second at 1080p resolution with HDR support while in handheld mode, and expect the game to run even better when docked. This will address a lot of the complaints that have been levied at the game over the years for its poor performance, especially in heavily populated areas like the Korok Forest in the Lost Woods. Additionally, load times have been improved drastically, addressing another common complaint with the original game. If you're worried about losing your save progress, don't sweat it. The Switch 2 version of Breath of the Wild allows players to carry over their progress from the original, while also offering a second save file for anyone wanting to keep their save, while also starting a new adventure. Nintendo is also introducing a new part of the Nintendo Switch smartphone app called Zelda Notes, which is a second-screen companion app that you can use while playing Breath of the Wild that assists with navigation, plays voice notes left by Zelda that will play as you explore in-game areas, rewards you with daily bonus items, upgrades the photo mode, tracks stats like how many enemies you've defeated and how many chests you've opened, adds achievements, and lets you trade items with friends using QR codes. All in all, Zelda Notes adds a lot to the experience of playing Breath of the Wild, so if you're going to try out the Switch 2 version, you'll want to download the Nintendo Switch app so you don't miss out. Content-wise, there's not much new stuff in the Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild. However, the improved frame rate and resolution will be more than enough for many people to justify sinking another 100 or so hours into the game. With Zelda Notes, however, there's a lot of new free content, it's just not on the cartridge. And that's everything you need to know about what's been added to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild since its launch for the Switch and the Wii U in 2017. With the Switch 2 edition, there's plenty of reason to jump back into the world of Hyrule with its improved performance. Plus, the re-release serves as a great excuse to check out the DLC if you missed it. Thanks for watching, and for more on The Legend of Zelda and all things Nintendo Switch 2, keep kicking it with IGN.